Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Monday, August 5th, 2024 West Fargo City Commission meeting. Would you please join the commissioners and myself for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Here.
Commissioner Zundell?
Here.
Commissioner Jardis?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Thank you. Let the record show all commissioners are present. Next order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioners, it has been presented to you and it is in your packet.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jorgensen. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Zundell seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is to approve the minutes of July 15th, 2024. Again, they have been distributed. They are in your packet.
Make a motion to approve?
Thank you, Commissioner Zundell. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of July 15th, 2024 as presented. Is there any discussion?
One question.
Commissioner Olson.
We had a special meeting on July 29th, a week ago.
Secretary's out of the room.
I was wondering if we needed to approve those too, because they're not in the packet.
Mr. Scott?
Yes, we should. I'll have to ask Emily where she's at with those minutes, but we
Okay,
absolutely
so
should.
we can do that next
We can
time.
do it the next meeting.
Okay.
Yes. Yep, there was no action taken.
No action taken, but there was a special meeting, so.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's not picking up any sound. I've got it, but it's like there's no sound at all.
Can you hear?
No sound on there.
There's no
Yeah.
sound. We're not talking.
So I'm gonna keep it good, it's okay. Just kidding.
Ms. Hagemeister, we don't have the special meeting that was taken in the packet for approval.
The minutes?
So would you?
No, I have them on written there for the next one.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
again, we have a motion and a second for the approval of July 15th. Is there any discussion? Thank you for the question, Commissioner Olson. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is building permits. The building permit report has been distributed. Is it in your packet?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Jorgensen moves. Commissioner Olson seconds. We have a motion and a second to approve the building permits as presented. Is there any discussion?
It's just great to see the number that keeps climbing.
A very robust report. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the consent agenda. We have items A through G.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as distributed and in the packet, items A through G. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We are now into the regular agenda. The first order of business is the public comment period. Madam Secretary? We have anyone signed up for that?
You all received one sheet, and then I think there was a late submission as well.
Mr. Nicholas Stensland? Please step to the podium. Please state your name and your address. Welcome.
Nicholas Stensland, 1139 38 1/2 Avenue West, West Fargo.
Sir, speak a little clear into the microphone, please.
Yes. Here.
Thank you. We want to be sure and hear your comments.
Right here. So, just start speaking then? All right. Sorry, just give me a second. Just like this. Like, sorry, I'm not the best with this. Oh, thanks. My name is Nick Stensland, and I'm from the Eagle Run neighborhood of West Fargo. I'm here today to advocate for the funding increase of mills asked for by the West Fargo Public Library for the next budget cycle. The main reason I'm here for them is because I've been an active library volunteer for the past 7 years and have been using their services for even longer. And since I am advocating for the increases approval, I should first thank the Commission for its previous support of the library, such as the approval to fund 2 important staff positions earlier this spring, along with Mayor Darce's help in facilitating a newly donated library on wheels to replace the Little Red Reading Bus, which should be unveiled on August 13th. So I, as well as many others, thank you for your work. Now, that said, the increase asked for by the library should be approved, as it'll be used to do some incredible things that our community needs. Besides allowing the library to maintain their current staffing and fund those newly approved positions from the spring, this will also be used on lease payments for the library space in City Hall, which will allow the library to focus on moving towards branching out their services south of the interstate and help many residents like myself, as the drive to the library for me is about 20 minutes and I didn't have a car until about October. And not to mention, this would also help us catch up with the rest of the metro, considering Fargo has 3 locations and Moorhead recently approved of a new library's construction. Essentially, the approval of the West Fargo Library's preliminary budget will allow them to continue their operation smoothly, while also allowing the library to grow and help them assist more people like me. I mean, if it wasn't for the research I did there, I probably would have failed numerous tests. And whether it's from the amount of books, the free access to a computer, magazines, or even the youth community events that they do, the library is a cornerstone for just about every city. And if there's any way to help out our library, it would be wonderful for the Commission to approve of it, as you have numerous times before. So again, I hope you consider its approval, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stenson. Commissioners, any questions of the gentleman? Very good. Thank you, sir. Do you have any other signed up?
I did not, but I think you guys received one.
We did receive another email from Mr. Larry Schwartz, the president of the West Fargo Library Board, advocating for the increase in the .8 mills for the library funding. And I believe that's been forwarded to all of you commissioners. With that, that ends the period of public comment, and we now move into the regular agenda item number 2, which is A24-19, a zoning ordinance amendment to the Title IV relating to planned unit developments. Aaron Nelson will be directing this conversation, our planning director, and approve the second reading of the ordinance. Good evening, Mr. Nelson, and welcome.
Good evening, President Dardis and Commissioners. So item 2 is a request for approval of the second reading of the zoning ordinance amendment for planned unit development, or PUD, section of the city's zoning regulations. This item was originally presented to the Commission in full at their January 1st, 2024 meeting, and then subsequently approved of the first reading on January 15th, 2024. There have been no changes to the ordinance as included in your packet tonight, and so I'm here to answer any additional questions any of you may have. Otherwise, the requested action tonight is to approve the second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Commissioners? Commissioner Zundell.
I just wanted to clarify, the changes, if we voted today, would take place when?
I believe they'll officially take effect once the notice is published. And I don't know when that date is, I guess.
As a rule of thumb, it generally takes a couple weeks after this commission approves it. Then the form publishes it a week later, so 3-4 weeks.
And anyone impending with applications, would they be subject to the old way or the new way?
The old way until it officially takes effect.
Okay. And then if they haven't done or they haven't started any of the hearings before then, they would transition to the new way?
Correct, yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any additional questions for Mr. Nelson? This is an actionable item, Commissioners.
Move we approve second reading?
Commissioner Olson moves to approve the second reading. Is there a second, please?
I will second.
Commissioner Zundell seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading ordinance of A24-19, a zoning ordinance amendment to Title IV relating to planned unit developments. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Item number 3 on the regular agenda is the amendment to record-keeping services agreement and trust or custodial agreement, float compensation disclosure. That's a mouthful. And we're going to call on Sarah Koshevic, our Director of Human Resources. Excuse me. Mr. Scott, you look like you're leaning into your microphone.
Yes, thank you, President Ardis. Ms. Kosovich is not able to attend tonight. I told her I would take care of this item for her. I don't have a lot of detailed information on it, but I do know that this agreement did go through John Shockley and his office, and so I guess at this point I would just stand for any questions.
Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Shockley, maybe you could provide a bit of overview on what we're changing or doing compared to the old one?
Certainly, Mr. Commission President, Commissioner Sandell, this is agreement, it's been a little bit since I reviewed the agreement, but this is related to HR matters in which you have your plan for your compensation disclosure and how you they keep documents within the for retirement services. And so they serve as a trustee and they hold those documents, and this is an amendment to the plan. In years past, it probably would have been approved by staff, but my advice was to put it on the commission agenda just for approval so that there was a formal approval by the governing body. But this is all about the retirement plan and how they keep documents and provide the safekeeping of sensitive information that's associated with retirement and healthcare and those other issues.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Any additional questions, Commissioners? An actionable item.
I make,
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Jorgensen moves to approve, Commissioner Zundell seconded. Been moved and seconded to approve the amendment to record-keeping services agreement and trust or custodial agreement, float compensation disclosure. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 4 is an enterprise grant for Shops on Cheyenne. I'm going to call on Casey Sanders Berglund, Director of Economic Development for the City of West Fargo. Good evening, Ms. Berglund, and welcome.
Good evening, Commissioner President Dardis, Commissioners. Tonight I have an enterprise grant for Shops on Cheyenne for consideration. The applicant is located at 110 Cheyenne Street. Currently, Scan Designs has leased this space or this property for 5 years. So this property is located in the downtown mixed-use zone, which is one of the eligibility requirements for the enterprise grant. Additionally, the fit-up or the exterior renovations that this applicant is looking to do all meet the criteria, or at least the bids that were submitted for this application meet the criteria. And then just as a reminder, the enterprise grant is funded through economic development sales tax. For this project, the total renovation or the bids submitted were submitted at $141,923. And that means the eligible reimbursement is 50% of that, or $70,961. Those renovations would include things like HVAC work, window seals, continued work on the parking structure, as well as signage, which is one of the goals of the downtown areas, obviously exterior facade fit-up. I would say most notably some of the conversation from our Economic Development Advisory Committee that was held on August 1st, and partially why they wanted this as an approved recommendation, is that we talked about the lifespan of infill facility. Formerly, this building was used as furniture for less, and they occupied this property since 2004. And so there was a lot of things that maybe were not updated throughout the lifespan of that facility. However, the Economic Development Advisory Committee did ask that the recommendation be considered by the City Commission, that we open it up to the max, which would be $150,000 with a reimbursable $75,000. To offer some context why I believe that conversation changed from sticking to the strict 50% rule is in the past, we've had projects that we've offered an 11% contingency. And if we offered an 11% contingency on this project, that would go over the 150,000 or 75,000. So just wanted to offer kind of the mindset, if you will, of the advisory committee when they were discussing this project. If you have any questions, the owner of the property is here tonight. Otherwise, I'll stand for any questions about the grant.
Commissioners, any questions?
Just a comment.
Please, Commissioner Olson.
This is a little different than we've had in the past, where it's usually been the tenants that has been coming in and asking. Here we're having the actual property owner, which is a big plus to the EDAC, because it's the owner putting the improvements in rather than the tenant, so.
Yeah, in this case, it does work out, considering the goal of the program is that the infrastructure that's provided by the program stays within West Fargo and within the property. And so if the tenant would leave after 5 years, the grant money would go to helping support an updated HVAC for whatever the new tenant would be. Hopefully, Scan Designs will find success in West Fargo and stay for much longer than 5 years.
So as Commissioner Olson pointed out, this is to the owner of the property that we're helping make the improvements to. What is Scan, are they taking over the entire facility?
That's correct.
Okay, so my next question would have been, if they're gonna break this space up, would another tenant be eligible for enterprise grant as well? So, okay, very good.
So in that case, they are taking the entire space. However, through the grant program, that property would only be eligible for one grant.
Anybody else? Additional questions? Okay, thank you. Commissioners?
I make a motion to approve the grant and to allow for a contingency up to the max of the grant at 150,000, 75,000 for our contributions.
Thank you, Commissioner Zundell. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the Growth Initiative Fund request as presented by Ms. Berglund tonight?
No,
Enterprise grant, excuse me. Yeah, I'm on the wrong line, aren't I?
You want to get home?
My apologies to all. The enterprise grant for Shops on Cheyenne. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 5 is a Growth Initiative Fund support request. Casey Sanders Berglund, again, Director of our Economic Development. Please.
Thank you. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing the team at the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC. This is a request that came through the Economic Development Advisory Committee as well. And this request is for $650,000 of economic development sales tax to be infused into the Growth Initiative Fund. I would most notably, before I turn it over to the team at the EDC to talk about their program, most notably I would say that the Economic Development Advisory Committee recommended this for approval on our August 1st meeting. The discussion largely discussed the fact that this is not going into the operations at this organization, but most specifically going to be used as an investment for a revolving loan fund. And I'm sure they will talk a little bit more about how that fund has supported West Fargo businesses in the past and what that would look like moving forward. I'd also be remiss if I didn't note that this fund will not be used for specifically only West Fargo businesses moving forward, and want to be very transparent that it is something that Fargo, Cass County, and West Fargo in the past has supported and is used for any primary sector business in Cass County. So with that, I'll welcome Mr. John Mahachek and Joe Raso from the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC up here to talk about the Growth Initiative Fund.
Good evening and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Casey. Commission President Dardis, Commission members, thanks for the opportunity to have this discussion with all of you this evening. My name's Joe Raso. I'm President and CEO of the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC. Oops.
Sorry, I'm just going to pull your PowerPoint up.
That's probably helpful. Well, Casey's working on the PowerPoint. Am I okay?
Yeah.
Right here? Can you hear me okay? All right, excellent. I just want to, I'm going to turn the dais over to John here in a second, but I want to maybe provide a little bit of background, my own perspective, and then this particular program. This program's been in place for 30 years. I just so happen to be involved in economic development across 4 states over 30 years. And I'd say this is probably the most impactful economic development program I've witnessed in my time doing this work. And so I think it says a lot about the wisdom and the forethought of the leadership in West Fargo, and Cass County. Casey had mentioned that this program operates within Cass County. As you know, we serve the metro, but this is specific to Cass County. It is not available to companies in Clay County and Moorhead. As Casey said, what we're going to cover with you is it's not for operations for the EDC. And it's not part of an initiative and a partnership we have with the Chamber of Commerce called Innovate 28, which some of you may be aware of, and a program and plan that we're working on with the Chamber over the course of this year for the next 4 years. This is a program to partner with the Bank of North Dakota companies, and I think John either has handed out or will provide you a list of the businesses over the past couple decades in West Fargo that have utilized this program. It's very successful. It's really focused on the financial institution working with the companies, the Bank of North Dakota, and a local support from a governmental entity. In this case, as the EDC, we've operated the program and served in that capacity for its entirety. We're not asking, when we make this request for $650,000, for any increase in taxes. It's to really take the funds that are in that economic development sales tax program and direct it towards a program that showed quite a bit of success over the last 30 years. And John can show, I guess because of the success, the particular situation that we're in as a region in supporting primary sector development. So I'll turn it over to John. We can walk through the slides and then take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Joe. So I'm going to share a little bit of historical context that kind of helps you understand the program as well. And as Joe stated, so mostly through the Bank of North Dakota program, it requires so it's B&D's word, a community partner. So PACE and FlexPACE can't happen without a community partner contribution. So it's a separate nonprofit, has 7 board members that review the applications with us. Mayor Dardis, you attended one of them last year, kind of got to see it in action. The fund was mostly funded from 1994 to 2001, and you can see the amounts there with Cass County putting in about 4.2, City of West Fargo 2.7 million, and then West Fargo 331,000 for about 7.3 million. West Fargo's accounted for about 4.5% of that 7.3. The bulk of it was cash. It was a combination of cash and existing loans, because prior to the Growth Initiative Fund doing this, the communities would have to do their own loans, and so there's a few loans that were existed, and I don't believe the public entities really wanted to be doing loans, so it made more sense to have this loan fund managing that. So as of today, it's had about 8.4 million in assets, and you can see on there, this is the loan, kind of the history since the beginning. So we've done 299 loans used. We've done $20.4 million in loans with that money that was originally allocated. The $716 million of capital investment, that's those projects that did the $20 million of loans. They had invested about $716 million into the community on that. And you can see the job total is about 7,000, about 6.3 million in square foot. And then another great thing about this program is that when the community does contribute the funds, there's a matching state grant from the Bank of North Dakota. It's almost a 2-to-1. So the $20 million of loans that were put in helped generate about $36 million of state grant funds that go to those primary sector companies to kind of help them in the expansion. And then I kind of took those numbers and I broke it down to just showing the West Fargo loans. So you can see to date, we've done 67 loans, a little over 4 million. They were part of 178 million in capital investment. and those triggered about $7.7 million of grants as well to the companies that were part of those projects. I have the list. That question was asked at the EDAC meeting, and so I had to base off my memory, and I could remember a few, but I couldn't remember 30 years worth. And so I did print them just in case it was asked.
I asked.
That was my next question. Thank you.
And then the list will be in order, alphabetical order by company, so you can see some of them have had multiple loans over those 30 years.
Thank you.
This next slide just kind of shows why we're needing more money. Activities really started picking up around 2017. We're averaging about, if you go over that span, the last even 6 years, we're averaging about $1.3 million in new loans every year. And then there's an imbalance of the payments coming in. So the way Bank of North Dakota requires the PACE program to work is, so the money we're lending out, which is they call the buy down, we cannot take any payments back on it until all that money is used up. So it goes out as long as 10 years, but the average, when we did our math, is about 7.5. So you can see when we had a ton of loans going out and we're waiting 7.5 to 10 years for that stuff to start coming in, it's causing this kind of depletion of our funds. So when we kind of ran the math based off averages over the last 5+ years, we figured what we need if we didn't want to run out at all and get to a point where we have to tell anybody, no, we can't do any loans, we have to wait for more payments to come in. We think it would need about $3.4 million of new funds if these averages of 1.3 million is kind of our new normal. And that doesn't even count if Bank of North Dakota raises the limits. If they raise their buy down limits, then our loan amounts will go up as well. Right now, we have about $550,000 of uncommitted funds left available to lend out. In doing that math, we estimate if there's no new money injected in, we'd have to lower our amount to about $750,000 in new loans for the next, through at least 2031, which is cutting it almost in half. And then the last slide here is kind of as we presented the county too, we used, for illustrative purposes, what was a $500,000 for the county, which is about $670,000, which is really similar to the amount we're asking today for $650,000. And then we just illustrated what this would look like if we were to do 4 years in a row of those amounts. It doesn't get us to that 3.44 to kind of get us out in perpetuity, but it's enough for a while. And again, it's just to kind of give you an idea of what things would look like. I didn't want to get too much into the weeds of things. If you have questions now, feel free. If you ever have questions later, if you ever want to attend one of the board meetings, just let me know.
They're exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'd add at the end, we did approach Cass County. We had conversations with Fargo. In both cases, this would be asking them to increase a millage rate that wasn't part of their budget process. And even though both said this was a program that's successful, in fact, they've put millions of dollars into it, they weren't able to in this budget cycle. And so why we were coming to you is we looked at the usage of this fund over time based on the resources that have been put in, the growth of West Fargo, far different than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so we believe there's going to be even more projects that come and benefit the whole region, but also specific just to West Fargo primary sector companies. So our intent is, as we see this program being utilized, and if it keeps at the pace it is, coming back and having a conversation with the public bodies in the county is something we might continue to do, because we want this to be a perpetuating fund. And we thought that we might have that be the case, but we've seen such success from it each year for the past 5-6 years. And because that money is patient money and it takes a while to come back, but it's proven to come back. It's come back over almost 3 times. So it's not a grant, it's a loan that we manage, and you have a representative on that board. So take any questions that you might have.
Commissioners, questions? Jorgensen.
What are the requirements for getting this loan? Because I see there's a couple businesses on here that are no longer in business, and one in particular had only made it 3.5 years.
Yeah, so the requirements, first of all, they need to be a primary sector company. And then it has to be, so trying to get too far into it. So that'd be primary sector company. It has to be for term debt, so it means monthly P&I payments versus like a line of credit. So it's usually real estate, equipment, and sometimes working capital. Their bank and Bank of North Dakota have to be able to partner on it to do that as well. And then we look at it as also has to be a growth project, so it has to be causing the business to expand. Are they expanding their square feet? Are they adding jobs? Are they automating processes, equipment? And then, so we look at all that, and then we look at, how there's an economic impact of that. And then the way it works too is that they don't get all the money up front too. It goes into an escrow account at the Bank of North Dakota. So our money plus the grant money, it gets pulled out every month over the span of up to 10 years to kind of lower their payments. For some reason, if a business were to like close or leave before that time, the loan stops and the grant money stops too.
And you receive that back?
We receive it back,
exactly.
yep.
Okay.
And then
Exactly.
basically, then the borrower has to pay us the balance back.
And could a fund of this size lose on a project or two? Yes, but over the life cycle with the economic benefit of 6,000 jobs, and we've seen 7 million get invested 20 million times. I think one banker said to me, you have a loan loss rate that makes banks jealous. So that's probably.
What is your default rate?
It's
You had-
almost non-existent. I think it's been 12 years since we've written off a loan. They're very rare.
Of the 299 loans
Yeah.
that you've
Yeah.
written? So Cass County nor the city of Fargo are contributing to the fund this year, is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay. And you're asking, obviously, if you look at the return on investment for the city of West Fargo for 67 loans at over $4 million in loans, $177 million in total capital, 1,140 jobs, that's a very positive thing. It concerns me that we're the only entity that is giving consideration for a contribution this year. So remind me who's on the board for your initiative?
So we have, the West Fargo appointment is Steve Dushik, who's with Dakota Business Lending. City of Fargo appointment is Hari Pangini, he's a business attorney. Cass County's appointment is Tom Seymour, retired individual. And then the EDC appointments are Julie Whitney, who's with Bremer Bank. We have Mark Voigt, who's with Agathos Biologics. Josh Tigan, who's with the Department of Commerce. And Lisa Yanni, who's a banker with US Bank.
Thank you, John. Anything else? Commissioner Zundell?
We're doing questions or discussion?
Either.
Either? We're the only one that has economic sales tax out of the other agencies, yeah.
Correct.
I guess where I stand on it is I feel like we collect the economic sales tax for region for economic development, and I feel like we've paid in a lot less than all of the other people have in this fund. So I think it's a good idea personally.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Any questions?
I got one
Mr.
question.
Jorgensen?
What was the reason for Cass County and Fargo not donating to this fund?
In this year, it's just their current budget situation they were looking at. For instance, Cass County mentioned in the hearing the new jail pod and financing that, plus some of their staffing needs that they had. We didn't get into a lot of specifics across that, but it was essentially looking at this year's budget, and even Cass County said, if this was a different budget year, because Chair Peterson has supported this program and asked us to bring it forward before they started going through all their budget numbers, because he's felt it's done what it's supposed to do for the individual cities and the county.
And this is a one-time ask at this point, so it's not like a reoccurring contribution.
Is that correct?
Yes, that is
Please, ask
Yeah,
that
this is a one-time ask, right?
that is correct. But as I said, as we go into next year, if we look at where the funding is and we see the results, we would do what we did this year, was have conversations with each of the taxing bodies to see if it made sense.
Commissioners? Obviously, the ask is for $650,000, or we could consider a lesser amount. What's your pleasure?
I'll make the motion we approve for 650,000.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve for $650,000, revenues coming out of the economic development sales tax.
I will second.
Commissioner Zundell seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve funding of $650,000 from the Economic Development Sales Tax Fund to the Fargo Moorhead Economic Development Corporation. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carried. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is an overbilling, underbilling policy. This discussion is about the approval of overbilling and an underbilling policy. We call on Mr. Matt Anvik, Director of Public Works.
Good evening, Commissioner President, Commissioners. Just here tonight to get, I guess, the commission to approve the overbilling or underbilling policy. In the past, we've been trying, with going into a new utility billing software, we're just trying to clean up a few things. And at times we run into things where we have, errors, either underbilling or overbilling, and just for, I guess, transparency's sake and to make sure we have everybody on the same page, we just kind of wanted a written policy that was approved by the commission going forward, just to make sure that, it makes it easier for our staff to be able to speak with the residents who call in or, wanting to understand, why there was a certain charge, if they're underbilled or overbilled and what happened and what we're going to do about it. As long as we have this policy, then they can go back to that and explain to them what we have. The city attorneys went through and also made a repayment schedule plan that is part of the packet as well. In case that is a lengthy period of time that we haven't, we have undercharged, and that could be because of a faulty meter or, something that happens to a meter where we're not getting the correct reads until we get in there, get the new meter in, and all of a sudden find out that we've been, undercharging that, residents or business for multiple years or months at a lower rate, and that gives them the option to, kind of have a payment plan as well. I guess we're kind of doing this now just because we think we might run into a couple, here and there, going through, and we're cleaning up for the new utility billing software, and just would like to get this on the books and have a written policy. I'll stand for any questions.
Questions from Mr. Anvik?
I have some comments.
Commissioner Zundell has comments.
Yes, I had spoken to Mr. Anvik about this as well. One of my criticism about this is that we don't have a specific date that we can go back to. I feel like it's very broad to say we'll determine a fair date, and really, if it's our error and we're the ones underbilling or overbilling, I feel like we owe it to them to have a stop date of when that should be. My other comment on this was the fact that we make an effort to return any overpayment to whomever owned the home at the time if they were no longer at that address. It's my understanding that as it sits, it would be whomever currently lives at the address responsible for the undercharges. So let's say the home was sold, we figure out that, okay, we underbilled whomever was the resident at the time, that the charges would go to the current address. And I don't think that should be that way either. I think whoever was on the billing statement at the time is the person who owes us the money, and I don't think it should be the responsibility of the new homeowners.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Anvik, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, we did have that conversation, and a lot of times it's like the underbilling, a lot of times will go to that address. And that is one thing that we're kind of working towards, and I know the city of Fargo does as well. If there is a non-payment at the end of the year, they put that on that property taxes statement. Currently, we haven't had the staff or the time to be able to do that. We're hoping with the new utility billing software, freeing up a little bit of time for one of our staff to maybe start working on that. That'd be a policy we'd have to work with Mr. Scott on as well to move forward. But have we, Fargo puts it on the, I guess, the tax statement. So if that is sold, that homeowner would, it would be out of their property tax for the sale instead of the person buying that property being stuck with that bill. Kind of what we've had it a couple times in the past year or so. And I think we do, at the current time, we do try and make every effort to, if we do, or had to overcharge somebody, we do try and make every effort to try and get those funds back to the person that was overcharged. I don't know if it's specifically called out in here, but I think that is still kind of a standard what we try to do.
Anything else additional? Commissioner Olson?
Based on what you just told us, Matt, about how Fargo does it, would we have to set up, if we wanted to go that way, to put it on that property's taxes, would we have to set up anything with the county? Or how would that happen?
I believe so. I think that's still just kind of a thing we'd like to get to, but we're not there yet. And once we do that, that'd be a policy question that would have to work with Mr. Scott. And if that's something that would have to bring back in front of the commission to get approval to move forward with that, I think is something we'd also have to do.
We can't do that at this point?
I guess I wouldn't know enough of the background specifics to be comfortable moving forward with that just yet. Unless.
What do we do for non-payment?
Current non-payment, it's just continues, they continue to add charges to that bill until we shut them off for non-payment. And if, sometimes it's a rental house and then just non-payment, and then it just either goes back to the property owner, or if it's a house and it's sold, then the person who bought the house actually, once they move in, that bill stays with the property and not the actual.
I just wanted you to state it. I'm aware with what we do.
Is there a way to put a lien against the property? If they continue to make a non-payment, like when you do construction work.
Yeah, that's what we would kind of do, at the end of the year, if we could kind of go through and everything that we had, the non-payments, for the year that were still, I guess,
If they're still
in the rears, yeah, we'd be able to put on the,
Right.
Shut
But
the
I'm
water
just-
off.
Right.
right.
But if, in case they do sell, there's a lien on the property that they have to satisfy the lien before they sell the property.
I think that's what we do with putting it on those taxes. That way it would be,
Okay.
we'd get it back some.
Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Commission President Dardis. So, yeah, there is the ability to put these charges onto someone's special assessments, for example. Now, when that happens, it's a part of their taxes, and if there is an ownership change, that does become the responsibility of the new owner. But that is certainly something that the city can incorporate today. We have other situations where we have to put a fee on somebody's special assessments, so.
I just feel very uncomfortable with it becoming the bill to someone who takes over the house. I just don't think that that's the right thing to do. I don't think it should stay with the house. I can't imagine any other system where someone would incur charges for something and then you move in and you have to pay those charges when you had nothing to do with the water use or anything else. So that's my big holdup. I don't think that that's right by, especially someone that's new moving into West Fargo, like, welcome to West Fargo. Sorry, you have a gigantic water bill payment to pay. I did reach out to some realtors because I know that was kind of a question, and they all indicated that they wouldn't really have any idea that the water was shut off. They had kind of said they even have a hard time calling to get averages on bills because people don't really release the information unless it's the homeowner specifically that's doing it. And so unless they were doing their walkthrough and they went to go turn on the water and the water literally wasn't working in the house on their final walkthrough, they wouldn't have any way to know that if the person hadn't disclosed it.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Olson?
So if we went ahead and approved the policy that we've got here, we can always amend it if we wanted to and incorporate something a little more like, once we know what where we can stand and different things like that, right? At least we can get this going now and start the process of having something uniform for our employees to be able to explain it, and everybody's got the same script that they know. It isn't, shooting from the hip.
Yeah, because I mean, in the overcharges portion, like in sections 4 and 5, you're talking about a specific kind of route where if there is a refund, we're gonna have to give it to them. If we can't find them, we're gonna mail it to their last known address. If that's returned, we're gonna give it to the state of North Dakota, I presume to the unclaimed funds. In undercharges, there's just really no, okay, if it's not the same homeowner, this is what we're gonna do, or this is how we're gonna remedy the situation. So it's not even necessarily that something would be stricken out, it just, I think something needs to be added that explains the intent for that situation. Because the customer in this case, if I understand correctly, again, is simply the person that resides at the address at that time.
Mr. Anderson?
I'd like to see some more clarification around the undercharges especially, or, around what we're saying, because I'm not comfortable with billing new residents, for previous owners. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
Agree.
And actually, I think I'd have to double check, but I think that would actually require an ordinance change. Because we had this instance about 2 years ago, and it was, we had some internal discussions on the language of that ordinance and following that ordinance, and the previous finance director that was here, it was done similar places in Minnesota where she had worked in the past, and that's why we kind of went with that wording as the bill remains with the property, and that's kind of the wording in the ordinance right now. So that'd be something we'd probably have to go back through and change the wording in the ordinance.
Mr. Anderson?
Is not having a policy like this holding anything up currently?
Well, we've been kind of holding off on a couple. We found a few meter charge ones that they're, small dollar figures, but we've been kind of holding off to make sure that we're following the policy correctly. If we want to go back, I mean, we could follow that with the addendum, that we can bring it back. And if you want to look at changing, I guess, on our policy and how it, goes back to the either follows the resident or follows the address, we can change that as well. And we can further flesh out the underbilling policy and I guess take those corrections in as well. We can begin to kind of follow this policy as is currently. We just won't be, I guess, formally adopted until we can bring that back.
Mr. Zundell?
Are any of the current ones you're waiting on people that no longer live at that address? Or is everyone that you're aware of now still residing in the same?
As far as I'm aware, everyone is still there. It's still the same. It's the same. Most of them were commercial ones where they were put down on the wrong meter size, and then we just got the changeover. So most of those were just business addresses, which are currently still in.
And then my other question is, how far back is the furthest back error we found?
I want to say about 2 years, I believe, is the farthest one currently.
And when you're calculating these, you can determine without question what the error was?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say, 99% of the time we can get to an exact date. Anything, we've gotten most everything cleaned up to the last few years. Prior to probably say 2020 or so, it got a little fuzzy because that was when the rate changed and we started billing by meter size for the base charge. Then it was a little bit harder to try and pinpoint that, but now with our meter changeover, we really have the majority of everything cleaned up, and we're just finding small little errors here and there.
One more question, Mayor. Mr. Shockley, how do you feel about if we ended up having to chase down someone that, or I guess, if we attempted to bill the current resident if the house changed place and they wanted to dispute that, what would that look like?
Mr. Commission President, Commissioner Zendel. Under the Century Code, you are permitted as a city to charge the property. The water service is to the property, not to the owner, just like garbage service is to the property, just not to the owner. The rationale under the Century Code is that it's a service that's provided to that property. You need water, you need sewer, you need garbage. You can certainly, as a commission, make a policy to alter that if you wanted to move away from holding the property responsible to having the specific owner responsible. It is certainly easier from an enforcement and collection standpoint to hold the property responsible than the individual owner, especially when you have many parcels that are rented and the landlord will make the tenant pay the utilities. And oftentimes tenants will leave the property and not pay the last couple of months of the utilities. And so the city, especially in the commercial setting, has the ability to go in and collect on the property against the landlord.
So in theory, we could have a different policy for residential versus commercial? Because that makes sense from a commercial standpoint of holding whomever owns the property responsible, because I'm sure renters do renter things and they're the ones that have deposit checks and things like that, but.
You could certainly have a differential policy, but you'll also find some of, having dealt with this in other communities, you'll also find the same issue facing the city in residential properties. Often some of your larger water uses are residential properties. You think of all the apartments, and landlords have varying ways of handling the utilities with their tenants. And so there's some complexity in developing a policy that would track the owner. I'm not sure how we would track somebody who rents a one-bedroom apartment, doesn't pay their water bill. You could potentially have a write-off, and then the question becomes, from a policy standpoint, is that necessarily fair to the rest of the system? So many policy discussions. I know my role. I'm just giving you what the legal side is, but there's some complexity around developing a policy, and many water systems and sewer systems spend a lot of time thinking about those issues.
Anything else additional, commissioners?
Well, it's a start. Kind of policy, right? I think we can be comfortable with, so I'll make the motion to approve the current policy as
Is there-
presented.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Jorgensen seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the overbilling and underbilling policy as presented this evening. Is there any further discussion?
Can we put it with a caveat that we'll continue to look into that specific issue for further consideration?
Please ask the second first. Mr. Jorgensen,
Yes.
are you all right with that?
Yes.
Motion made.
Good
That
point.
that is acceptable to the second and the motion, the person that made the motion. So that is part of the main motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Item number 7 is a capital improvement plan. We're going to call on Mr. Dan Hansen, our city engineer, to adopt the 2024 CIP.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. At our last commission meeting, I presented our preliminary 2024 capital improvement plan. It was presented for review and comment. Since then, I've received several commissioners that have asked some questions, but overall the feedback has been positive, and there has been no feedback from commissioners that I've received requesting any changes to the CIP or the assumptions that I had presented. I had originally planned on bringing this at the next meeting, but given the lack of requests for change, There are a lot of things that are kind of waiting for this CIP to be approved for us to start moving forward with, such as the RFP for the Growth Area Master Plan and some other projects that we can get started once this is approved. So the presentation that's in the packet is the same one that I had presented before with no change. So I could go through it again, answer any questions, looking for approval of the 2024 Capital Improvement Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Questions, Commissioners? Anything?
Are we
Commissioner
on,
Jorgensen?
are we on pace to complete the projects for 2024?
There are a lot of them that are commencing, and there are some that are waiting for this to be approved for us to begin. But I'll say this, that I'm very happy with our progression towards those 2024 projects. So yes, not entirely, but for the most part, yes, we are on pace.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else additional for Mr. Hanson?
I make a motion to approve the CIP plan.
Commissioner Zundell moves to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the CIP plan as presented by Mr. Hanson for the 2024 CIP plan. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Under item number 8 is the North Side Sanitary Sewer Collector Rehabilitation, Phase 3. Again, we're going to call on Mr. Dan Hanson, our city engineer. Purpose of the discussion is to create a project number 1316-3 and direct an engineer to prepare the engineer's report. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Commissioner, President Dardis, and Commissioners. The 1316 project was the North Side Sanitary Sewer Collection Rehabilitation Project that's been undergoing several phases over the last several years. This is the final step in this project. Since the time that we originally bid that project out with KPH, we had installed a new salt shack on site, on location, up near SA 40. And with that installation of that salt shack, it changed a little bit of the grading and around the site, and also it enforces need for additional pavement for Public Works to be able to access the salt shack. There was some temporary pavement that was put down last year to make it usable over the winter last year, and because it was just temporary, that's why we didn't have very much snow, and they helped us out with not having to use it as much as we could in other years. But that being said, there was some pavement that was in the 1316.2 project that we removed from that project, and we knew that this project was coming up so that we could properly access the site. I'll jump down to some of the exhibits. Obviously, this is where it's located, up near the SA 40 lift station. You can see the new salt shack is the big building here, and you can see just south of there is some asphalt that Public Works installed to be able to access the front doors for that. We also have the vac truck pond, where we go out and we discharge our vacuum trucks into that pond. The area in blue here was something that was originally included in the 1316.2 project that we removed from that, so that way we could make sure that we get a proper topography survey of the site and make sure that everything is graded fine and works. Everything that you see in orange and blue here would be what we would be looking to get installed. And this is basically just a grading sheet. We're proposing concrete for this portion, the main access to the vac pond. The reason for that is that's where you have a lot of turning movements for your heavy loaded vehicles and trucks, and also the vac truck. Out front of that, we would also have a concrete valley gutter to help get drainage off of the site over to the vac pond, and then the rest of it is some asphalt. This project is included in the 2024 CIP as a project to move forward with, and with that, I would entertain any questions.
Any questions, Commissioners?
Move we approve.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Zundell seconds. Moved and seconded to approve the Northside Sanitary Sewer Collector Rehabilitation to create project number 1316-3 and direct the engineer to prepare an engineer's report. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 9 is project number 2265, 9th Street Northeast and 7th Avenue Northeast reconstruction. Again, we call on Mr. Dan Hanson, our city engineer. Purpose of this discussion is to approve a task order number 3-5 for design services. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Commissioner President Ardis and Commissioners. This project has been ongoing over the past couple of years. It's been in front of you many times. The base project is the reconstruction of 9th Street Northeast from Main all the way up to 12th Avenue. And then also from 7th Avenue from 9th Street Northeast and east to where it ties into Fargo's newer concrete roadway section. Recently, the city submitted for and was successful in securing a raised grant for the construction of a grade separation or an overpass above the existing BNSF railroad track crossing 9th Street Northeast between Main Avenue and 7th Avenue. The grant that we received was in the amount of $23,816,550, which is 80% of the anticipated construction costs of that overpass. Now that we have the grant in place, now we get to begin the work of designing the overpass. Houston Engineering is currently the consultant that we have doing the design and eventually construction administration of this project. They also design bridges and overpasses, so we would like to include and approve this task order 3-5 with Houston Engineering for them to begin the work on the design of the overpass. The estimated timing for the project, now that we got this raise grant, is to bid the project out next fall for construction in 2026. And so it was fortunate that we were able to get the raise grant, which was the first one that we applied for, because having received notice that we received it this far in advance of our intended bid date or window of bidding dates, it allows us enough time to be able to get this designed and incorporated into those plans, so that way we can bid it out as an all-inclusive overall package. So with that, I would recommend approving this task order for design services, and I'd stand for questions.
Any questions, Commissioners? Of the $18 million local share, how would that be paid for?
The intent of it, as I had pointed out in the CIP presentation, is estimated to be that we would go out and actually bond for the local share of that. We are not intending for the costs of the overpass as presented to be included in any form of special assessments. We're recommending that we would actually bond for that, which would obviously set up debt and payments for it, but that is too large of a sum of money just to assess the local businesses to that area. And it is a regional, absolutely, this is a regional project that benefits everybody in the city.
Any additional questions?
I have one, I
Mr.
guess.
Jorgensen.
When they do 7th Avenue, would it be two different projects per se, the west side and the east side, so as not to terrifically impact the businesses there?
The entire project will be bid out as a whole in one, and due to our funding, it has to be that way because we were able to get STBG grant in the amount of about $9.6 million towards that project, as well as the flex funding grant that we received from the DOT in the amount of the $8.8 million. So it does have to be an inclusive project. Now, given that, there will be absolute consideration for access to businesses along the roadway. We're not going to be able to just say you're out of business for this entire construction season of 26. So there will be some temporary access provisions that are going to need to be incorporated into the plan set.
Yeah, I just want the businesses to know that they're still going to be fully accessible. Like, I could see K&K really being impacted.
Yeah, I'll say inconveniences are expected. There's absolutely going to be inconveniences. There's no getting around that, but there will have to be some form of phasing or temporary access or some form of provisions put in there to be able, so that these businesses can continue their operations.
Thank you.
Anything additional for Mr. Hanson? This is an actionable item.
I make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Zendel moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the task order number 3-5 for design services for project number 2265, 9th Street Northeast and 7th Avenue Northeast. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 10 is the review and request of approval of the 2025 preliminary budget. We call on Mr. Dustin Scott, City Administrator for the City of West Fargo. Mr. Scott.
Mr. Mayor, quick break.
Okay.
I can see this taking a while.
We stand adjourned for 5 minutes. Thank you.
I am too. I am too. Yeah, she had. I know.
But, you know, she'd come in with one of these big sippy things. She'd be drinking water. She'd be sipping all the time. reconvene the West Fargo City Commission meeting. Next order of business is a review of the preliminary budget by Mr. Scott, City Administrator.
Well, good evening, and thank you again, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. Well, it's my pleasure to bring forward tonight our preliminary budget. I think the hard work of our staff have brought us to a good place tonight. A lot of changes have occurred over the past week since we had our public meeting on the 29th. And so excited to go through that with you and answer any questions along the way. Just a brief overview of our timeline. As you know, we have to get our preliminary budget statement over to the county before August 10th. So that's why we are asking tonight for approval. And we also need to schedule our budget hearing date, which I've shown here to be September 16th. From there, we are proposing to have another special meeting on the 23rd just to review a draft of the final budget, and then bring the final budget to the October 7th commission meeting for approval so that we can get it over to the county before October 10th. Wake up. There we go. Okay. General assumptions, these are the exact same assumptions that we were making last week. We started with a 4% COLA, and that 4% COLA is still reflected in the expenditure numbers that you have before you tonight. We are currently estimating a 10% increase to health and insurance benefits, as well as our workforce safety insurance. And we have adjusted some cost allocations to reflect the above escalations. As far as revenues, value of a mill has increased up to $271,000. We are proposing to increase utility rates. Part of that increase will be a pass-through from Fargo, and the other part will be what we will propose in the coming weeks. State and highway tax held at the 23 levels. Franchise fees are at 4%, and we are projecting a 3% increase in our sales tax collections. So, getting into expenditures. I sent you all a report earlier today. Really, in summary, we have reduced our expenditure budget by $733,000 since last Monday. In total, we are looking at about a 17% increase from 2024 to 2025 budget.
Mayor, may I make a comment?
Mr. Olson.
Just to point out that the 2024 budget was as of October of 2023, and we have made some adjustments or amendments to the budgets since that time. So the $29,714,000 isn't what we currently are at. So it isn't as great as increase as what it appears to be here, right?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Olson, and my apologies. You pointed out that correction last week, and I failed to make it. So yes, as Commissioner Olson pointed out, the 2024 numbers do reflect the approved budget in October of 23. There have since been a number of budget amendments, some staff increases, and some other expenditure items. We will work to tabulate those amendments and include that when we bring forward a draft of the final budget. But as far as what you have in front of you tonight, it is still based on those October of 23 budget values.
Commissioner Zundell?
Could you clarify, when we were looking at the utility rates, I know we made some assumptions based on increases for costs for that. Are we including a fee for bulky item pickup in that next rate set? No.
No.
So that would stay exactly as is with whatever was just passed?
Yeah.
With the increases.
Yeah.
As presented last year.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Matt and Logan with the sanitation, and we're gonna reevaluate, because as soon as the garbage rate changed on July 1st, Mr. Anderson was in that meeting also. So we're gonna look at reevaluating come October, I think is what we kind of roughly agreed on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please continue.
Okay, if no other questions on the expenditures, I'm going to progress along here. So this slide here is just really highlighting what changes have been made over this past week. As you can see, again, a total of $733,000, primarily out of reducing new staffing requests, one FTE out of the admin department, one FTE out of the HR department. They were willing to hold off on those requests and continue to do that work with the staff they have. Another savings came from fire, forestry, and streets, looking at delaying some of the hires that they are requesting. For example, the fire department holding off to hire until March of '25. So in doing that, that obviously comes with some savings there. And the same thing goes for forestry and streets. Matt Anvik was looking at staggering some of those new hires as well. So then there were just some general fund and fire fund line item reductions. Some of that was also came with some efficiencies in capital that Chief Fuller found in his fire budget. And I believe he did send out his budget report to all the commissioners last week. And then a change to the library fund in their capital planning. Whereas last week we showed about $256,000 worth of capital improvements. We did take $106,000 out of that, and they are gonna come before the commission on a separate request to amend the '24 budget, utilizing capital improvement sales tax dollars to fund their fit up at the new City Hall location, their satellite office. So that $106,000 is not reflected in the budget anymore, but that is still a very important and needed project that'll come forward here in the coming weeks.
Mayor.
Mr. Jorgensen.
So I did a ride along here last week with Dan Birnbaum, the street foreman, and I don't know what they're looking to hire 6 people. One I seen was a foreman, so I hope we hire within to promote that person, and then hire additionally 6 people. But I don't know when they put out the application process, what kind of response we get. Do we get 1 or 2 or 3 applicants every time they put it out? And looking at the streets, they're in need of severely repair from what I was shown, and I'd like to be fully staffed in that department come spring.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I believe they've got a request in for 4 operators and a crew chief. Is that right, Matt? Yep. And so and what Matt took a look at is just, again, staggering it, but having everybody online for the summer work. So trying to find some economies of scale there, but still taking that work very serious, and hope to have a crew up and running for next year's paving season. So again, you can see here on the slide that shows our new employee requests, the 2 positions that were eliminated. You can see the other positions where, based on delaying the hiring or staggering the hiring, the savings that results from that. Also take an opportunity right now too to give a little update on the benefits, the health insurance. I said in the first slide there, we're still estimating 10%. Talking to our HR director, Ms. Gosevich, she does anticipate that coming down, but we are still waiting to have a final word on what those increases will be. So we're hopeful that that number will come down, but we likely will not know until sometime mid-August, end of August. Typically, we know before September 1st. Similar slide to what you saw last week, except just adjusting these numbers down a little bit based on those changes that we just reviewed. And again, 1% of COLA is equivalent to about $307,000. Any questions before I move into the revenues?
The calculation that's in the preliminary budget is a 4% call.
Yes, that is correct. So we are still maintaining and requesting a 4% COLA.
I have a question.
Please, Commissioner Zundell.
In your single percentage shift for COLA, it looks like we went from 310 to 307. Is that just based on the employees we cut, or where was that reduction?
Yeah, I think there was just, last week we just used somewhat of a
Rough
estimate. Yep, and I rounded it up.
Okay.
We just honed in and provided a little more detailed information or number here so that it's not a guessing game of 310,000 or 306 or 313. Yep, so. Okay, moving on to revenues, similar slide that you saw last week. Again, just demonstrating the increased valuations and how that reflects through the varying funds and their mill levies. Another slide that you saw last week, just showing the impact to a median valued home at $339,000. So including the library's request for a 0.8 mil increase and the increase in valuations, we're estimating a property tax of about $1,232. And again, that is for a home that is valued at $339,000. We covered this a little bit last week as well. Just a little blurb about the proposed measure on property tax reform. The only thing I'll really share that's new information here is the League of Cities is putting on a webinar on August 15th. I believe Commissioner Zundell has registered for it. I myself am registered for it, and I hope to learn more about what to expect with that measure as it continues to move forward. So revenues in the general fund, really the main difference here that you're going to see is in the transfers item. And that transfers item is right at the bottom on the right-hand table, that $4 million number. We were at about 2.7, 2.8 last week. We have increased that transfers into the general fund. That covers things like taking money from property or from public safety sales tax to cover some of the expenses in the police department. Again, this is just the general fund revenues. We also are moving some public safety sales tax into the fire fund, and we'll get to that in a couple slides here. But that's largely the biggest change you'll see with the revenues into the general fund. So here's our revenues for the other funds that are levied: fire, library, airport, and then our utility funds. So along with those increased transfers from our various sales tax, economic development sales tax, capital improvement sales tax, public safety sales tax, Chief Fuller also identified some additional revenue sources to help out with the fire fund, state insurance distribution, some additional fees, collecting on CPR classes, some of those things, all helping with our shortfall that we proposed last week. So any questions on revenues before I kind of get into the summarizing of what you've seen here?
Commissioner Anderson.
Looking at the franchise fees, are we assuming flat to what we budgeted for this year? I know that there's been some delays in implementation and collecting some of those. So it looks like we're assuming flat. Is that accurate? And is that an accurate number for next year? Looking at, so like electrical franchise fees budgeted 2025, 1.97 million.
It's our best guess information, yeah, there's nothing concrete about it, I guess, if you will. I mean, that's, it's a projected number.
I'd like to look at Mr. Shockley. For 2025 budget, they should be all implemented by that time.
Correct. The only one that, it just went through the PSU, and I think the only one that's remaining was Cass County Electric, and they were just finalizing their process. So my understanding was they're about 2 weeks away from the increased collection at Cass County Electric.
So we'd be shorter this year than what we budgeted.
Yes, yep, we'll be shorter this year than what's budgeted. We will be collecting at 4% level for
Right.
25, but even at that, it is still a projection of what we'll
Right, and
collect, yep.
and if we increase, if the rates get increased, say Excel increases their electricity rate, the franchise fee then would go up because it's based on total rate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
The franchise fees were estimated at, what, 3.2 million for 2025, I believe?
For 2024 or for 2025?
2.4, excuse me.
That, I'd have to double check on that. I don't remember off the top of my head. Okay. All right, so this slide here, quantifying what we've changed since July 29th. Starting with the general fund, roughly $1.6 million in new revenue. Again, the majority of that is through various transfers from sales tax. So we didn't find a new pot of money necessarily. We're just utilizing what we have in terms of those sales tax dollars and applying them to where we feel align with the services that we provide. Then we did find over $330,000 worth of expenditure reductions. So totaling just over $2 million worth of change from last week. So again, very significant change. Last week we were sitting at about a $2.2 million deficit. So as you can see there, then equates to, or just shy of $200,000 of deficit, which you'll see in a coming slide here. Fire fund, net difference of $765,000. Library, again, that was very specifically removing out their fit-up costs for the new City Hall location. No changes in the airport fund, and a slight change in the utility funds, the reduced expenses largely relating to the staffing adjustments. Which brings us to our new net position totals. As I mentioned, the general fund is now just shy of $200,000 of a deficit. Again, it's about a $2 million swing from what we were showing last week. Fire fund at $1.4 million deficit. That's down from $700,000 last week. Library, now sitting $17,000 ahead. Airport, $52,000 ahead. And our utility funds combined at about $880,000. So one thing I'd want to touch on here before we move forward, when it does come to our general fund and our fire fund, you know, the fire fund has its own mill levy. That is the way it was back when it was a rural fire department, its own district, and so it did have its own levy. Other communities like Fargo, fire is included in the general fund, and so I did mention this to the mayor this morning that I think we should take a look at combining that into the general fund so that we don't have one department on an island, if you will, with a spotlight shining on it. I think it all should be underneath one umbrella. So as we do move forward into the final budget, we will be looking into what that takes. I don't believe there's much for process, and talking with our attorney this afternoon, it sounds like there's really just an approval from the commission that would direct staff then to make the appropriate changes in the accounting, so. But we will look more into that. If you do have feedback as you think about that, share it with me by all means, and again, all that really would change is instead of showing that there's a deficit in the fire, it's really just holistically, we have roughly $1.6 million deficit between our general fund and fire. So it would just all roll in together. It doesn't change the dollar amounts necessarily, it just brings it into one group.
Commissioner Olson?
If we go through with that, is there anything we have to do with the county since it's a levied mill levy? Is there anything we have to do there to make it all legal for our budgeting process, or doesn't it matter for our budgeting process?
So, and I forget the specific year, but approximately 10 years ago, the legislature allowed home rule charter cities to blend all of your mill levies together. And so there's not really any change. It's just at the direction of the governing board, the city commission.
I just didn't want any holdups.
Yep.
To do this, so we got everything, all the processes done in order. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep, and we would check with our auditors too, and just, what are if it's better to wait come January 1 versus another point in time in the year, we would certainly want to flush all that information out, but I do think it's appropriate and something that would be a lot more, or easier for the public to understand as well. Okay, options for deficiency. Really, this is just a refresher from last week. Of course, we can always look at reducing line item expenses, reducing new position requests, or the COLA, finding additional revenues or transfers, and then use of reserves, and of course, any other option that the commission would want to propose. So over the past week, we, of course, have implemented some changes, and this top half of the slide, if you will, are some of the changes that we have made that are reflected in these numbers. We've already talked about the expense reductions, $730,000 worth. And I mentioned use of sales tax, but being a little more specific in that you're looking at the public safety sales tax to cover additional operational costs. Essentially, that'll be the new FTE requests, both in police and fire. Expanded use of the economic development sales tax. There are some equipment and other things that we can and really should consider to fund with those dollars. Commission President Dardis said it very well to me last week in that, without the economic development sales tax dollars, we wouldn't have some of these public spaces to maintain that we do now have. So feel that it is appropriate to utilize those revenues to offset those costs versus having that come out of our general fund or street fund or utility funds. And then have an additional use of the capital improvement sales tax. So Mr. Hanson just walked through the capital improvement plan with you again. There are mill and overlay projects in there for 2025. Of that, there's significant work that Public Works will be doing in-house. And so transferring some of those dollars from the sales tax fund over to the street department to cover those costs. It's very similar to what we do for economic development, and that the economic development sales tax is transferred over to fund the economic development department. So very similar use. It's just it's something new that we are exploring for the 25 budget. So that covers the changes that are reflected within the materials that you have. Then the last three bullet points here are options. They're just things for the commission to consider with a dollar amount tied to them. So the first one being adding mills. So with the library already asking for 0.8, finding a somewhat of a nice round number, and 6 mills would mean then another 5.2 could be utilized to help offset the deficit that we're still showing. So 5.2 mills, roughly $1.4 million. We could look at additional use of the public safety sales tax. We do have some reserves starting to build up in that fund. It would certainly be possible to dive into that, understand exactly what we do have available, and pull from that. The information that we've had in this presentation has really been reflecting the proposed revenue collection for 2025 and the expenses for 25, but there is a little bit of money sitting that has been building up now that we've started collecting last year. So additional use of our public safety sales tax and or reserves. So all or one, just understanding that those are options to help address our deficit. And somewhat based on feedback from commissioners, taking a look at what a COLA would look like if we were at 3%, of course, that would reduce our expenditures by another $307,000. Going into a little more detail on that, you can see how that would affect the various funds that we have. So general fund, a little over 200,000, fire, 43,000, utility funds, 45, and then the library, 15,000. So really not a lot of change by reducing the COLA. But again, based on commissioner feedback, we did want to demonstrate what that would look like. Similarly, in this slide here showing, how we would balance the budget. So, and again, this is meant to be more of a plug and play with your options, but for the general fund, you could cover that deficit merely by reducing the COLA from 4 to 3%. You could also use reserves. We could look into the public safety sales tax or some of the other sales tax and continue to explore those options as well. But for the sake of demonstrating this, the COLA reduction would certainly offset that. And then into the fire fund, again, you can plug and play the options here, but we are showing the 3% COLA reduction would cover that $43,000. And then we could look toward our public safety sales tax and or reserves to cover the remaining shortfalls. So again, not meant to be our recommendation necessarily, just continuing down the demonstrating what options are available to the commission. This next slide, something that Commissioner Anderson requested to put together a holistic impact to our residents, showing what the proposed increases in utility fees are along with the property taxes. And so really this table is showing for an average residence using 4,000 gallons of water per month, having one 64-gallon can, and having a median value of $339,000. You can see here roughly the proposed increases of the utility fees is about $15 a month. And the additional 0.8 mill levy, along with the increased in valuation, that equates to about $5 a month. So again, just a slide to help demonstrate what the impact is to the residents based on the budget as we have it today. So before getting into the final slide here, before we start talking how we want to move forward with the preliminary budget, just show the commission what some next steps will be after we approve the budget. It'd be great to continue to work with commissioners and get additional feedback on how we want to refine and bring forward a draft final budget. Take the next several weeks to receive any other public feedback. again, we will have a budget hearing scheduled for September 16th. And along the way, there'll be certainly opportunity to collect feedback from the public. For staff, really, it's going back in, addressing all the comments that we have received, updating our historical information, again, to reflect some of the amendments that have been made for the '24 budget. We'd really like to start having a good handle on our cash balances before we get to the budget hearing. With our 2023 audit nearing its completion, we feel like we're in a position to start that work, but we do need to wait until all the final journal entries and all that good stuff is made with the 23 audit. And then, from there, just continue to run scenarios for commissioners to review and answer questions as they come forward. So with that in mind, really, again, this is meant to be an optional slide. This isn't necessarily what I'm bringing forward as a recommendation, but based on the feedback we've had and the expenses that we've presented, a motion could be along the lines of approving the preliminary budget with the expenses and the revenues that we are showing. You could adjust the COLA, you could request additional monies through public safety sales tax transfers, use of reserves, so on and so forth. But ultimately, the commission would have to come to a consensus, approve the preliminary budget on those factors, so that then we can turn around and prepare our final statements for the county. Along with the motion to approve the preliminary budget, we also need a motion to establish the budget hearing on September 16th at 5:30 p.m. And so with that, before I turn it back over to questions, I'll share my personal thoughts here. We've shown and demonstrated that reducing the COLA from 4% to 3% really is not going to make that big of a change. And I am fully confident that we can find other ways to keep the budget deficit down without having to take it off the backs of our staff. And so we all certainly respect the decisions that you guys have to make, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't out here speaking for the 300 staff that we have working. So with that, I will turn it over for any final questions. The remaining slides really are the special funds. We can get into that if you would like, but I thought it would be good to just pause here and focus on the expenditure revenue budget that has to get approved. So again, with that, I'll answer any questions.
Commissioner Olson.
So with the timeline of us having to get the preliminary budget to the county by the 10th of August, right? Do they, after we do that, do they send out, the preliminary one has to be there by August?
Yep, the preliminary budget has to be returned by August 10th, the final budget by October 10th.
But do they send out two different notices? Will they mail something out right away? Do we know that? Or I know they send one out in October after the final one, but do they send one out, a preliminary one?
Yes, yep, they send out, yep, so.
That's what the confusing part is. There's two different notices.
Right.
One's preliminary.
Yep, and this caused a bit of a stir last year, the timing of that with the school district's referendum request and so on and so forth. Can't necessarily solve, we'll do our best to communicate to our residents that that'll be happening, but yes, the county does send out their preliminary tax statements based on the public entities and their mill levies.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Zundell.
And talking about the COLA, I just want to clarify, if we went from 4 to 3, wouldn't that cover the deficit in our general fund?
If we did, yes, yep, so that slide that you see right here.
Because our general fund looks to be down.
Yep, so our general fund deficit is 188,000. Yep, and that's where reducing the COLA from 4 to 3% in the general fund would cover that.
And then it looks like COLA's, Clay County came in at 3, Moorhead Union projected 4 to 6, Fargo 4.5. If they advance a step down to 4, Cass County 2.5, and West Fargo Parks 3.2.
Correct.
So if we went down 1% on that, we would be relatively in line with the rest of our area. Even if we went down to 3.5, that would cover the deficit pretty much.
To clarify on Fargo, they are considering an advance in the step for some of those employees that are maxed out.
Okay.
So if they do that, then they'll probably be at 4. If they don't do that, they're going to be at 4.5. That's the way it was explained to me.
Yep. So one thing we don't have in here, we don't have a reserves balance slide. Last year, we did provide that information, and I just felt a little bit uncomfortable in providing it this year just because we don't have a good handle on it, but I will say this, we do have a very healthy reserves, and that is certainly always an option too.
And I specifically requested of Mr. Scott not to use a reserve number until the 2023 audit is complete. I want to know exactly what those dollars are, and then the commissioners can give consideration as to whether the reserve should be considered as part of this. And that's forthcoming in the next couple weeks. Commissioner Olson.
Just keep in mind that we were just previously talking about folding in the fire mill levy fund into the general fund. So if we do that,
11 mills, I believe, right?
it just doesn't your comment about if we reduce it from 4 to 3, it takes care of the deficit in the general. Well, if we're going to fold in the fire into the general, it doesn't take care of that.
Their deficit is greater, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So it isn't a one thing there. So you have to look at this as a whole amount versus just two separate amounts.
Take a look at your fire fund.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, if
I know you do.
we're looking for a deficit amounts and ways to make up a deficit, I feel like, I mean, to what degree do you feel like you can cut things other than that?
So,
I mean, outside of transferring money over, which I think the concern amongst the general public is we're spending money out of savings, because that's basically what we're doing in some of this, especially if we're talking about a transfer from reserves, which I understand the point of, we shouldn't just keep taking to not, but what reductions are really left outside of transferring money in from reserves?
Great question, and that's where I don't have a solid number. I can't guarantee that we could come down X number of dollars. I know that we can continue to work at it, to chip away. Yep, absolutely.
we have inquiries into WSI and Blue Cross and Blue Shield right now.
Waiting.
That, we've put in a number of a 10% increase. And as you can see, a full family coverage for Blue Cross and Blue Shield is calculated at $27,000 a year. So we have inquiries into WSI and to the Blue Cross and Blue Shield as to if they can give us more accurate data on that, where we might be realistically.
And just to add some number to that, if we have roughly 30 or 300 staff, and just for sake of round numbers, $30,000 in health insurance and all of that added together, that's roughly $900,000, okay? Let's bring that down to $800,000 because I overestimated, but at $800,000, a 2% swing gets to be substantial.
Significant.
Yep, those things start to add up in a hurry. Is it a matter of looking at all of the line items and just really asking staff to come back and find $300,000 worth of reductions to keep us at a 4% COLA? I'm fairly confident our staff would do what they can to get there. I can't guarantee that because I don't want to compromise level of service either. So, last year we talked about our healthy reserves. We know that they are well outside of 25%. I don't want to give an exact number of where we're at, but most communities are trying to stay in that 15 to 20% range. We are well beyond that. And so we do have a healthy reserve that can offset our deficit. And again, looking at our deficit as a collective whole, $1.6 million, that's where, again, I will do what we can to bring that down, and I'm fairly confident between reductions and taking a look at additional transfers from other revenue sources, again, our sales tax, for example, we can get there, short of, I mean, again, short of me guaranteeing something, I know that we can get real close.
Commissioner Olson?
Well, the elephant in the room is we could still do a mill increase. And we wouldn't have to touch the reserves at this point because we don't know what they are. Doesn't mean that we have to go with the mill increase, but we could set it at that for right now, and it still gives us until the first meeting in October to decide if we really want to stay there or can we find other means to do it. And I think that's the way we should go. Go with what Mr. Scott had said with the 0.8 mil for the library and the 5.2 for the general fund, and then we go from there and we can whittle it all down. And if we decide to not go that way, we certainly can, but if we don't go there now, we can't. And then we have to look at reducing services. Are the streets going to get fixed? Are the sewers going to get flushed? Are the fires get fought and the criminals get picked up and things like that? That's what we're starting to look at. If we start cutting another 1.4 million from this budget. So I think we should, my personal thing is we should start out with the preliminary budget of increasing the mill levy by 6 mills total between us and the library, and then we don't have to worry about different things at this particular time. We'll have 2 months to think about it.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
You know, when we were given the budget, we saw previous years, and basically there was 25 total line items in there. Consistently, 12 of those departments went over their budget. I don't understand why constantly, every year, they go over their budget. So they need, the city leaders also need help for us. I mean, we take the heat, but if they're consistently over, I mean, there's no open checkbooks. You know, if we take the money for police and fire out of the city, the public safety sales tax, that their income or whatever amount, that should be that's locked into that account. I mean, we just can't use that account for this year and then next year have it come out of the general fund. And if we're going to be short, we're going to be short, but it doesn't seem right to have that pool, rely on that pool, and just keep maxing that pool out.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Anderson?
Go ahead. You were going to say something. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through some of the commissioner questions and dialogue over the past week, so speaking of the public safety sales tax, in doing some more research on it, there was very clear intent to utilize it for the operations and the continued growth, to offset the growth of those departments, utilizing sales tax dollars versus asking for additional mills or on the backs of the property taxes. And so I'd really like to dive into those balances, and I'm fairly confident that we've got quite a bit of money sitting in there that really could do just that, offset the growth, the cost to continue to expand our public safety services, utilizing those sales tax dollars versus our general fund, our property tax revenue. So, again, I would, that's where it's at some point, we're going to have to land somewhere. But the other point I'd like to make as you continue your deliberation is this is setting a ceiling. We can continue to come down. And so, approving a 4% COLA tonight, that can still come down as we moved into the final budget. Approving the use of additional reserves doesn't mean that we won't stop looking for areas to continue to cut or to reduce expenses. We will continue every effort to do that. Tonight is really about establishing what we feel is a comfortable ceiling And then a directive and the challenge for staff is to continue to work hard and bring forward additional reductions and other ways to address our deficit.
Commissioner Anderson.
So when I look at the expenditures by department, just that summary that's with general fund, other levied funds, utility fees, you say that the percentage increase is about 17.4% on here. You had outlined on the general fund that about a 10.7% increase. I just did some quick math here. It looks like the other levied funds is about 12% increase in expenses. So those are both under the 17. The bulk of this increase is coming from utility funds. And as outlined in the slide that has taxes and fee example, we're increasing utilities by quite a bit. A lot of that's on sewer from the looks of it. So that's where I would like to see some time spent to try and really evaluate some things. 29% is a big increase in expenditures there, and $18 increase in your utility bill a month is going to have an impact on many individuals. So that's where my concern lies. Another one that I have is the mill levy is up about 6%, and we're outpacing that with our expenses, with our expense growth. I know the easy button is salaries. When we're looking at COLA, we just look to slash it. I feel a lot better tonight with this than I did a week ago. So 4%, I'm still on the fence with, but I struggle with this, and I'm not up for increasing mills other than what's with the library. The library needs it. I like to see the library grow, honestly. But that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zindel?
One thing I think would be, I know it's not going to be on this budget or not, but I spent a lot of time this week looking into bulky item pickup. I'm not sure, like the dollar amount, when I sat down and calculated it, and I calculated it with Mr. Jacobson today just to make sure I wasn't completely off my rocker. Between doing branch pickup and bulky item pickup, we are talking nearly $250,000 in things that people are not paying for. Mr. Jacobson estimated to me on the phone today that he thought maybe 25% of the people used it in town as far as, picking things up. I know a $10 fee for bulky item pickup was something that was proposed previously. It sounds like maybe that did not get added and it wasn't anything that was fully agreed upon, but I think in looking at some of the utility increases, that may be worth a conversation, whether we are doing branch pickup 1 week a month instead of every single week, 8 hours a day, whether it's talking about looking at a cleanup week and condensing the amount of bulky item stuff we're doing for free in that period of time, or maybe we're doing it for free after holidays or something like that. But that's a lot of money, in my opinion. And if we're talking about not trying to increase it overall for everybody, I think that's a discussion that we could have.
That's where
Mr. Jorgensen?
I previously stated, when we met with Matt and Robin, Logan, we're going to reevaluate after October, because it's a learning curve right now. We just jumped into it in July, so we can definitely, we plan to address it, and we will address it.
One comment on the utility fees?
Commissioner Olson?
On the utility fees, you gotta remember that we kept those fees flat for many years, like 4 years. We should have been doing graduated step increases along the way, but because of when COVID hit, we didn't. We didn't fulfill our obligation as a commission to do that. We just left everything alone. So that's why they look like they're so huge of an increase right now, because we're trying to play catch up. We kept them flat, and we shouldn't have. So that was the one thing that we needed. That's why it's looking bad right now, because of the increases. But we have to get to these levels to pay to make them self-sufficient.
I'm not concerned about that. I'm looking at budget options as a whole. If we're looking for things to cut or ways to be, obviously Public Works has a very large budget. There's lots of moving pieces. My concern is how can we, I feel like we're constantly getting input from residents that enough is enough. I mean, how many times has everybody heard that? Everybody's saying, I cannot afford all of these increases over and over again. So how can we, either reduce mills or not increase them at all for people? How can we reduce the concept of services where if 25% of our residents are using it and we're paying $250,000, again, that covers our deficit. I know it comes out of a different fund, but I mean, that's $250,000, and that's, if you're talking $10 for a pickup or something, I just think there's gotta be a way for some of that to be more efficient. And I agree with what Commissioner Jorgensen said as far as, I really think the focus should be having a correct budget, because it's one thing to say we're gonna cut all these costs, like, oh, we're gonna cut it, and then we're gonna keep our 4% COLA, but then when we come around to it, we're off by 20 to 30%, which, if it's that increase, it's that increase. I'm concerned about having it right and having it be accurate for how we're moving forward, especially in this year with everything that's going on with property tax stuff. So moral of the story, I don't want people just to cut things that aren't realistic cuts, that we're gonna come back for adjustments and we're gonna be off, and then we didn't really have a budget that was accurate to begin with.
All good points. Couple comments, if I may. This is a preliminary budget that sets the cap of what we are considering. There's a lot of moving parts yet. The suggestion of Commissioner Olson with regard to a 5 to 6% mill increase, that will create a lot of public comment and discussion, and which is fine. We're always looking for our taxpayers to weigh in and offer their suggestions. But at the same time, it gives them the belief that we're not doing the other hard work. And I want to commend the department heads for the work that they've done up to this point, and Mr. Scott, for where we've gotten to in a short period of time, 1 week, we're $733,000. Well, some would suggest that was low-hanging apples, and should have been part of the discussion earlier on. These discussions are what we're doing, and the possibility of using some of the utility taxes or the taxes that we have, whether it's the public safety sales tax. We asked the public for that, and we guaranteed them. Chief Fuller and Chief Otterness at the time, we promised those people that we would spend that money in those departments specifically. Because we've had success in tax collections, and those people, the taxpayers generously accepted our proposal on that, we have about a $1.4 million budget in there, or revenues in there at this time. And of course, we have some commitments for those dollars as well with the new fire hall and the like. But there is, for the way that the language read and for what we did, we can use that money. We can use that money for operational things, because that's how we presented it to the public. And my issue is, when we talk about what our reserves are, or we talk about some of the money that we have in these sales tax collections, and then to go and ask the public for more money for a mill increase, I struggle with that. If we've got adequate reserves, it's like asking the public for more money to put in our savings account. And as we all know, in the economic climate and what our taxpayers have been communicating to all of us, that's not a good answer. That's not a good position for the commission to take. So again, understanding that this is a preliminary budget, And it's gonna be, you know, if we were to say 5 or 6 mills in this budget, it's a placeholder, is what it is. Or a 3%, a 3 mil increase, whatever the number might be. You know, that's gonna be entirely up to the 5 of us. It's strictly a placeholder. But that's not how the public will perceive it. They just won't. They'll think that we're going to tax them some more and ask them for more of their hard-earned dollars. So again, I would like to just, again, we need to come to some type of consensus. If this is the number, then we need to figure it out. But if we don't have a mill levy increase placeholder, we cannot increase the mills. Okay, just so everybody understands that. And we might all be okay with that, with maybe the exception of Commissioner Olson. He's brought it up, and it's a great, valid point. So there are a couple of items here that I think we need to clarify tonight that we have to have some consensus on before our September 16th meeting. Not everything, because we're gonna see a lot of movement in this budget as we continue forward. We have to. Because we're operating on a deficit, we can't do that. Any other comments? Suggestions? I'd entertain a motion, the first motion to set the budget hearing date for September 16th at 5:30 PM. Let's get that out of the way.
So moved.
Commissioner Olson moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the budget hearing date of September 16th at 5:30 PM in West Fargo City Chambers. Is there any discussion?
I have one thing.
Please, Commissioner, or Mr. Curtis.
Mr. Shockley, so with approving the budget, I think we had a conversation. It's been a factor to me because of my wife's wages. Was that ever?
It is a great question. It is not a conflict because you're asked to vote on tax levies, which affect you as commissioners, affect family members. It's part of the budget. It's not a direct conflict.
Okay, I just wanted to publicly clarify that, my wife's an employee like Brad's, and I'm not going to vote because that's included in affecting me.
Thank you for that clarification. I have a motion and a second on September 16th, 5:30 PM. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Commissioners? What other additional comments or questions do we have on the preliminary budget, or do you have a motion ready for me?
Mr. Olson's got a motion.
I'll make the motion that we approve the preliminary budget with the 4% COLA. And at this time, we do the 6 mil increase, which is a 5.2 general fund, and the 8.8 for the library.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion fails due to a lack of a second.
Should we chunk it out? Should we start with COLA? Can we make a motion just on that, or does it got to be an entire consensus?
Well, I would think we could continue with the discussion. Yes, you could make a motion on that as an individual line item, certainly.
Does everyone feel okay about, where is everyone at with COLA? I guess for setting a max.
Commissioner Zundell is asking the commission to weigh in on the debate with regard to COLA. So please keep your comments to the COLA portion of this.
Leave it at 4.
If we're gonna chunk it out. Okay. Commissioner Olson?
Leave it at 4.
Okay. Commissioner Anderson?
Capped at 4.
Capped at 4.
I agree to it because I think we also need to look at how the employees here are getting paid. And I'll reference my wife again. She doesn't get a raise. She's maxed out as per the steps, but yet the city leaders keep getting pay increases. They're not maxed out at steps. So if we got rid of the COLA, my wife would just stay the same. So I think we need to look at that and have the newer employees catch up a little faster versus the the cost of living raise, I kind of brought up, and 4%. Well, we have some employees that make over $150,000. They're getting 4%. That chunks out to $6,000 a year. But if they got 1%, I mean, then plus they're getting their steps, and you got this younger employee that's only, if he gets the 4%, at, you know, if he was making $75,000 a year, you know, it's a smaller increase for him. Where I think we need to start taking care of the newer employees and watch. I mean, kind of cap the top a little bit and put the harnesses on them, because it you know, and I'll call out Mr. Anderson sitting in the crowd. He wanted to do an interview or a yearly review with my wife. She goes, "Why does it matter? I'm capped out." So I think we need to readjust how we look at how we're paying our employees.
So would
The
it,
discussion is, so what is your feeling on the COLA?
I'm fine with 4%.
4%. Commissioner Zendel?
so how does everybody then feel about the library? I feel comfortable with a 0.8 library.
You're
mill.
fine with the 4%?
4% COLA, yep, I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that, too. As a placeholder right
As a
now.
placeholder, yep.
Okay, now the point, go ahead.
Is this gonna be a motion, or is this gonna be
I'm just
a
trying to see, I'm trying to see
continuation?
where we're, where we can find unity so we can get it all together.
You heard the discussion.
Okay.
The motion failed. on
Right.
that. So the library at 0.8%.
I feel comfortable with the library mill increase.
Mr. Anderson, you've stated that already. Mr. Olson? I am too.
Yep.
Mr. Jorgensen, okay.
So now we're left with mill increase, because that would have been the only other part of the motion. So the remaining mill you went with was 5.2, Mr. Olson?
Six,
So total 6?
so he,
Total 6?
Yep.
total 6. I'd make a motion that for a placeholder, we use a 2 mil increase. Is there a second? Motion fails due to lack
Well,
of a
you didn't
second.
give me time to think.
Yeah, I gotta think I was doing math. Went fast. Is my question
2
is,
mills is 271,000 and change times 2, that's
so that would cover,
$500,000.
I will second that.
I have a motion and a second on a 2% mill increase,
2 mil.
2 mil increase as a placeholder. I have a motion and a second.
And this is without the library, right? This is just.
Correct.
City Center. Okay.
2 mil plus the 0.8 for the library. Is there any further discussion?
Just one question.
Commissioner Olson?
Could somebody come back and say we want to do a 3 mil?
Sure.
Okay,
If this fails,
okay. Well, what if it passes? Could you still do it? I just want to know.
no. So if you don't vote for it, it's a 2 mil placeholder, mill levy increase, plus the library at 0.8.
Question,
Commissioner Anderson?
does this include COLA and,
Yes.
what was the other, okay, all,
We're
Delivering the whole
just
combo.
kind of doing a progressive.
doing everything,
Okay, that's what
Okay,
I'm wondering, if
all
we're
right.
just voting on just the mill?
right, just the
or
mill or
doing
doing
everything
it all?
we've discussed
We found
at this point?
consensus on the other stuff, I think.
So, but then do we look at how we're going to make up the balance of the deficit? Is that going to be the balance in reserves? That would
Mr.
be
Scott,
my-
do you want to respond to that?
Sure. The other option that was out there was a use of public safety sales tax and/or reserves. So a combination, or one or the other.
I realize that we're doing this quite awkwardly. You know, I get that part of it, okay? But we have to give this gentleman and his finance people and his department head some direction. And if we're not, so these are, we're giving them some caps. And then obviously you have to work underneath it. You know, it could come back to us in the September 16th meeting that none of us agree with where the mill levy increase is, that we found other revenues. We've now had a report on our, what our reserves are. And we agreed to take some of the money from the reserves. I'm trying to give this gentleman some direction. If this isn't the way we want to do it, that's fine. Let's go home. Please.
If I may, I'll offer a suggestion, and so with the 2 mills, that's 540,000. That brings us to roughly, I'm just gonna say 800,000. Split the difference, half with public safety sales tax, half with reserves, and that'll give us at least something to provide to the county, and from there, we go back to the drawing board and continue our work.
And will that be a cap? So then, if you needed to take 60% out of the reserves, are we limited by that if we define it specifically that way?
Yep, great question. So really, the cap is only the mills.
Okay.
The other options are still on the table to move up, down, left, right. So the mills, I might have to defer to Shockley on this, but my understanding is that Century Code establishes, the preliminary budget establishes a maximum on the mill levy, not per item.
Again, Commissioners, these are placeholders only.
Yep.
Because of what we have to do with respect to the county. These are only placeholders. I'll be quite candid with you. I don't think I will ever vote for a 2 mil increase. But I made the motion. We need to move forward and give our key individuals, our department heads, and Mr. Scott as our city administrator, some guidance here. If we can't make it work, we can't make it work.
So we have a motion and a second for
We do.
2 plus 0.8.
2 mills plus the 0.8 for the library. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried, 4-1 vote. Is there anything else that we want to give some direction to Mr. Scott on?
So the remaining would be, I think we'll maybe take Mr. Scott up on his recommendation to split the deficit between the public safety sales tax
We've got
and,
2 months to figure it out.
and they've got 2 months to
Yeah, we
figure it
have
out.
to figure it out.
Yep, so I would make a
I think
motion,
we could just leave that as it
you
is.
just leave it?
Leave it as it is.
Yep.
We have some, I think the things that were probably garnering the most discussion, we've given them some direction, and I thank you all for that. I realize this is an unusual way of doing it, but I thank you for your patience. Anything else, Mr. Scott?
Oh, thank you.
Anything for your city administrator's report?
Yes, Mayor, if I
Oh,
may.
we still have to make a motion, right? No, we're done. Do we still need another motion?
No, you've established the budget hearing, and I believe the motion included the changes to the mill levy, and we have clear direction on the other items. So I'm comfortable.
Okay.
And yes, if I may, a brief update with my administrator's report, when you're ready.
Please.
I think this would be a good time to provide an update on our finance director position. The one position that, we've been working on for several months here and is somewhat of a missing component when you're putting together a budget, an audit, so on and so forth. I can't thank our current finance team enough for all the hard work they're doing to supplement the absence of a finance director, but I'm pleased to announce that we are making some progress now with our recruiting firms. We do have, each of our recruiting firms have each lined up a candidate to interview. We are proposing to interview on August 16th. That's the following week here on Friday. We don't have the details locked down, but those 2 candidates are interested in coming here for an interview. And we do have a 3rd candidate that we are also exploring at this point. So some good movement on that. We have yet to have made it to a stage where we have somebody in here for an interview. So that's good progress. I've mentioned the 23 audit a couple times here this evening. More specific update, they are putting some final work in. They reached out, I know they had their interview with the mayor last week. They've reached out to the attorney's office for the paperwork that they need from them. So the final information is being prepared as of this week. We hope to have some draft financial statements possibly by the end of this week, if not certainly by next week, and a draft report ready for the August 19th commission meeting. I don't know the timing of when I can share draft information, but I'm hoping it's early next week, well before the August 19th commission meeting. Any questions on that or the finance director? I just have one more item. No? And I'll end on some good news. Police department remodel has been going well. They are tracking under budget, according to Chief Nielsen. If you have not been over in the West Wing, we're calling it, or the police department's calling it the West Wing at this point. So, but efforts are going well. They are tracking under budget. If you haven't been over there, reach out to Chief Nielsen or Assistant Chief Anderson back there. They will gladly take you on a little tour and show you the progress that they've been making. So, and that is it for me.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Mr. Scott? Thank you, sir. Any correspondence that we report of?
I do not. Emily, do we?
All of you should have received emails.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any non-agenda items by our city commissioner? Commissioner Zundell.
I had a resident reach out asking questions specifically about our ordinances surrounding our Airbnb rules, regulations. Sounds like they have an Airbnb that is next door that is increasingly problematic. I reached out to Mr. Nelson. Nelson?
Yes.
Nelson. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It's been a late night. And it sounds like our ordinances are fairly vague. So I guess I'm wondering the commission's appetite for either dedicating some staff time to research some options for Airbnbs or like ordinances that have to do with that, or how everyone would feel about that.
I know that they have been problematic throughout America as they continue to expand. I know that Fargo has had some serious issues with some people renting them and for party venues and the like. So, commissioners, your thoughts on that?
Worth exploring.
We have a lot of nodding heads. Commissioner Anderson? So could we have Mr. Nelson, would you please do some research on that and give us an update maybe in a meeting or two? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, non-agenda items by any city commissioner? Any non-agenda items by any of our department heads? Mr. Scott, any non-agenda items for you?
No, sir.
All right. Commissioner Anderson?
Move to adjourn.
Commissioner Olson?
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.